Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tribe Stories. We do this broadcast every once in a while to explore spiritual growth and ways for us to get to know God and navigate our life in much more alignment with Him. So today we're here together with Deb, which is really cool, and we're going to talk about the nation in pain. You know, our nation is on fire. It's in pain. There's just so much emotion, so much hurt, so many wounds that are coming to the foreground. And what we wanted to do is to have these conversations very vulnerably in a raw, sort of unfiltered fashion with people who have experienced this and in different ways and angles and dimensions. So today we invited Andrea and Napoleon Greene to be our interviewees. Let me give you a little bit of information about them. Napoleon and Andrea Greene, I'm going to read this, are a suburban African-American Christian couple. They're members of our church here in Austin, Texas. And they're looking for ways to embrace their experiences and perspectives as tools to serve, to uplift, and to influence others with their circles of exercise faith, hope, and love in the face of challenging social issues. Napoleon has worked for the past 16 years as a test engineer for a large international manufacturing company. And Andrea works for an innovative Central Texas school district as an elementary instructional coach, providing professional learning, coaching, mentoring, and support to classroom teachers and school staff. Of course, Napoleon and Andrea are just a pillar couple here in the church in Austin. Really good friends. Their kids are amazing. And we really love their perspective, their voice, their hearts for God. And so let's invite them on stage. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for joining us.
So glad to be able to do this.
So my first question is this, and it's free flowing. We don't have written down questions. We have some notes, right? Mental notes. But how have you, as an African-American couple with kids who are African-American, how have you digested, processed the last, week or so? How has it been for you?
We thought we'd just dive right in.
Yeah.
Yeah. A myriad of emotions and thoughts that I think at times I try not to really even lean into much. And I think from anger, frustration, and then these internal things that you feel that are kind of powerless, helpless. For some reason, there's underlying even kind of shame, which still kind of trying to figure out exactly what that's about, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of stems from just feeling so powerless that there's really not a whole lot that I can do. Like, I see these things happening and there's nothing that I can do to make a difference right now. And then trying to turn on my engineering brain to say, okay, if there's a problem, then there's a solution and we can figure it out. But this feels like one of those where there's no scientific process that's going to solve this. So I think the more it happens, the more processing that has to happen, and you get into this kind of grieving mode almost, right? Like I woke up this morning thinking, this can't be healthy for anybody to constantly have to grieve something like this with no closure. There's just never any closure. This could happen again tomorrow. It could happen again the next day. It could happen again, and probably will. And so trying to figure out, how do I live with that? And then even trying to pull myself away, like, that isn't happening directly to me. How are the families that directly are being affected by this dealing with, right? How are they? You wake up one morning and your family member's there, and tomorrow, the next day, they're not. And there's no explanation. There's no real clear picture of, hey, here's how I'm going to move forward. And I'm trying to understand, how does my faith prepare me to lean into this in a way that's going to be meaningful to just the people that I can physically touch right here in my circle, but then wanting to do something on a bigger scale, right? Being able to somehow make a difference. And it feels, again, just really hopeless. Like, there's no one thing that I can do especially as a father, you always I want to be able to fix this thing. Father of daughters, we always want to, I could do this, I could make this right, I could do whatever. But I can't, right? There's no silver bullet. There's no one scripture that I say, if I go to this and I share this, it makes a difference. There's nothing, no one thing that I feel like I can do to change anything.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
So I think for me, as I reflect back through the last week has been like devastating, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I look back to May 13th was sort of a demarcation line for me, I'm sort of disconnected from media. Like I'm connected to social media, but I'm not really connected to like news outlets and especially not sensational news. I just want the facts, right? And so I didn't know about Ahmaud Arbery. I had no idea. And on the day that I found out, just someone sent me a message that they were grieving, and I was like, "What's going on?" And that's how I found out. Mm-hmm. And someone just reached out to me for prayer and to check on me, and I had no idea. And so if I kind of walk back to, that was like May 10th, and then if I walk back to May 13th, was sort of a breaking point for me again, right? Like this is not a one-off thing. It's just the most recent time. And just so many emotions, so many things bubbling to the surface, just giving me the opportunity to really cry out to God with just honest questions. And, I felt like I had a Job moment where you're like, can you please tell me, maybe these people are right? Is there something wrong with us? But you made me this way. Like I've never wanted to be anything other than Black, but maybe, am I supposed to? Like God. And so just really coming to him with some really hard questions. And I think that just opened me up in a different kind of way. It was both grueling and very hard, but it was also cathartic. And I think opened up a path to be able to continue to work through grief. Mm-hmm. And an odd grief, right? Like it's a communal grief, not a personal loss per se. But I think when we think about the fact that, it could be my husband, it could be my son, it could be one of my daughters who suffers, and right, just knowing that it doesn't matter what their character is or who they are as people, I think that leaves you feeling fairly helpless and angry and frustrated and just feeling like, can this really change? But I think it opened up a space for me, for God to begin to work. And on that day is when I just sort of asked him, like, I was ready to throw in the towel. Like, there was like, God, I'm just ready to throw in the towel. Like, there's no hope in these kinds of situations. And then in the very next breath, expressing that I can't throw in the towel, God. Like, you are real and you are good and you want us to be your ambassadors in the world. And by ambassadors, I mean like ambassadors of love, right? Like to really be there. You can't turn away from suffering. You can't do it. And so just asking, like, what is the thing that we can do to comfort ourselves? Mm-hmm. We may not have answers, but could we have comfort and peace? And I really think, he just started working there. But it's devastating. And I have to protect my mental and emotional health. And I caution everyone to do the same, right? Like it is okay to not allow yourself to be consumed with what's happening in the news. It's not healthy. You can't then go serve and love and take care of people if you are empty and drained. So that's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both so much just for being so vulnerable and real about the myriad of emotions that we can feel through this over the last week, especially several weeks altogether, and coming off of the quarantine and COVID, where I feel like we've kind of all been going through this together. And maybe that's a good thing, that as we enter into this, there is a stronger sense of unity, that we're all in this together. I know that over the weekend, Andrea, you and I were talking yesterday. We had a celebration for our graduates. And your family has been very special and close to ours since we moved here. We moved to Austin about 7 years ago. Our daughters are friends. Abria and Emery were two of Deanna's first friends here. And I remember we were at a women's retreat after they'd gone off to college. And I remember sitting at the chapel at Camp Tejas with you and just crying and praying. And so when I see you, and now we're in different ministries, you're north and we're south downtown. So when I see you on a weekend like this, and the scripture that was on my heart yesterday was, even in laughter, the heart may ache. There are so many emotions that we're feeling at the same time. And I'm happy and we're celebrating. And yet my heart was so heavy because the protest, Justice for Them All, that was planned for Austin yesterday had just been canceled. And I had just heard the report from Chaz on the way up to the church building, and my spirit was not at peace with that and the reasons why, and hearing how protests had been hijacked basically by people who were trying to incite violence in a peaceful protest and derailing it, and knowing that people had planned, speakers and preachers and families and children had planned to be there on an important day. And we had planned to go after the graduate celebration, and feeling like this is such an important time to support our friends, people of color. It's an important time for us as ministers to show what we believe in as Christians, what matters to us, what I believe matters to God, that Black lives matter. They do matter, how very much they matter to us. And yet feel like this is just another example of a time when voices need to be heard and they're stifled. So first of all, I want to express to you both my gratitude for your friendship, for your voice, for the spiritual maturity that you process your decision making with, and for the way that you've raised your children. I have a question for you about protests and things like this weekend. Raising millennials and that idealistic, passionate season of life. How have you guided, and how do you advise your children or other parents when you watch your 20-somethings walking through this? Do you go to a protest? Do you not go? When do you speak up, and when do you find another way to let your voice be heard?
So yesterday we had a big conference call with our 4 children, and our kids are 22, 23, 25, and 31.
Hard to believe.
Right. And, I spent about 2 hours just talking to them about, and the only question we asked is, how are you doing? Now, mind you, we're in constant contact with our children, right? We are talking to them very, very regularly, but just knowing that yesterday in particular, we just needed to check in on every single one of them, each individually, and to watch them cry and, shaking kind of agony and despair and frustration and fear, and to hear the things that they were talking about, right? One of our daughters is in Chicago that is like, listen, you are sheltering in place, like, do not leave your house, right? And so she and her 3 roommates, they've got loud music playing. They're playing Kendrick Lamar in protest, and so them joining in protest in ways that they can, right? We have another child who's in the Air Force, and the Air Force says you can by legal right, and you have every right to participate in protest. However, you are not allowed to leave your home. And so you've got to find another way to make your voice be heard. And so hearing just their pain and frustration, even over those things, right? Just what can we do? And then, just offering this call to prayer, which our oldest, who is our son, just really encouraging his sisters in that way, and that them having solidarity among themselves and really talking through the things that they are thinking and feeling, and them being very creative in the ways that they can I say protest, but really just call people in, right?
Mhm.
Like I can call out racism. They can call out, right? Like they feel like there are things that they can do to call out injustices, but this is an opportunity for them to call people in, right? And so I think about Emery here in Austin and using her social media platform to really call people in to thinking about how to process these things in healthy ways, right? And how to lean into other people's pain if you are non-Black at this time, and how to embrace it as all of our pain, not just the Black community's pain, right? And then our son doing the same thing in his sphere of influence. So that was both, it was saddening, right? Like it broke our heart that they were heartbroken and just mad, right? Like they are just angry in our, to hear one of our kiddos say, like, in my core, I just want compassion. And it just seems like right now we have to fight, right? And I don't want to fight. I want to figure out how to be a person of compassion. But compassion doesn't make people listen. They don't listen. And so all these things that are happening, like, I get it, So for us, I think if they were like, no, we're going to a protest, then we would be there with them, right? Like that's, but right now, but we all were in agreement that we needed to go before God before we make any other moves, right? We just could not do that. And so that, conversation yesterday.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing how you're navigating this with your adult children. And I love the phrases that you've chosen. There are things that you call out and times when you call in and call people in, and that builds the unity and the compassion. One of the things I wanted to have you share with everyone today is when we were talking yesterday, you shared with me how God put it on your heart. He put something so strongly on your heart. And I think many of us have been praying, what can we do in this time? And I love how you just surrender and you submit yourself to what God is calling you to do, even if it might be uncomfortable at the time. And even if you don't know exactly what that would look like or you've never done it before, could you share about that process with us, what God called you to do, and then how you put that into action?
Okay, so really, and it almost seems silly because it was such a simple response, right, to a very big question of grief and agony. And literally, I was wailing before the Lord. What can I do? I don't want to do anything that is not going to be glorifying to you and useful to the people around me, but I feel led and called to do something. And literally it was offer a call to prayer. And I was like, in my mind, I was thinking, I don't really even know what that means, right? But instantly my brain, the way that it goes, I hear something like, much like Napoleon, I get into problem solving mode. And I slowed myself down and I was like, I don't want to do that. And I wrote everything out, right? Like all my questions, and God would give me an answer. Like, I mean, a literal call to prayer, right? Like is what came to me. And, I also like to do things really well. And so I'm like, I will study how you offer a call to prayer and how do you set up a prayer line and what does this even mean, right? And I did all of these things that looked like obedience, but really because it just was uncomfortable, right? Like it's different to call your friends together, like, hey, we need to circle up and pray, but to offer, because I felt really compelled to leave it wide open, right? To make it as wide, to spread it as wide as I possibly could, no matter what, right? No matter people's faith, no matter their stance, no matter where they were, to just really spread this and allow anyone who felt led or needing to pray to have a space to be able to do that. And so finally, I just kept feeling a push and a push and a push, and I would cry, and then I would feel like, but you have not offered a call to prayer, right? Like, no, you cannot write that yet because you have not done this thing, and just really feeling convicted about that. And so I talked it through with Napoleon, and very quickly, very early on, and he's like, well, you know, and another sister who was one of my best friends, and she's like, prayer is always the answer, so I'm not really sure what you're stalling for, you know, why you're stalling. But it is a lot to just be vulnerable in that way and ask people to come in to this sacred space and space for people. And I didn't know, you know, it's the idea of like people could be angry and they could have angry prayers, and people could be, you know, wailing and moaning, and what about the other people listening to that? What would that be like? And then, but I could quickly work through that and be okay with that and trust God that whatever happened, it would happen. And Napoleon, you know, he was a great encouragement. Like, let's do it.
Right. With the different responses, I almost felt like if that's what was going to happen, it's what was needed, right? For if we're going to have a diverse group on, then you have to have the diverse responses. Everybody can't. If everyone gets together that thinks the exact same, nobody's perspective changes. So coming out of it, I felt like we've learned a lot. At least I did. I felt like this is the responses that we got from the people that did call in. I felt like this is absolutely necessary, right? These conversations that are just really not very comfortable, they have to happen. And I think we're at a, for lack of a better term, kind of a cross section where we have some experience. We also have from relationship with people that are not directly affected. And that's what I believe is going to make some difference. When you have a relationship, then that helps you to kind of gain some of the perspective that when I look at the news, I don't really get. But if I talk to someone that I know, then I can gain some empathy, even if I don't already have it.
Right.
And also realizing that there's some things I think that people may hold as truths that we got to challenge that, right? We have to be in a position we're gonna question that and ask you to think about it a little differently, because that's not exactly what we're experiencing. I think maybe that's what you think how this is rolling out, but really that's not. And you can't know so definitely because I'm still figuring it out, right? You don't know exactly what should be happening and what we should be feeling because I'm here and I don't know, right? And I've had conversations with other African-American brothers and other Black men, period, that are saying the same thing. Like I'm feeling things that I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to be processing, right? I have been a little bit reserved in saying something because what comes out isn't this clear answer, and it isn't even any absolute, right? There's no absolute that I feel like I can speak to. And so making sure that people are aware that, hey, when you do speak into this, you need to speak into it from a position of humility because you have no idea what people are actually feeling, right? Again, I'm not directly affected, so I can't speak as if, oh, I am the representative for all Black men who have experienced something, right? I grew up in a little country town where we were segregated, and so I never really had a whole lot of negative interaction because we stayed in our part of town, went to school, and they stayed in their part of town. So when we did have interaction, it was more around education, right? Those kids respected some of what you were, but I don't really know what they thought about me. I didn't have all those kinds of extreme negative interactions. I saw them, I heard about them, I knew about them, but they weren't happening to me directly. So I don't feel like I'm in a position to say, this is how we all feel. No, I don't know exactly. And I do need to engage, which is part of what that was about yesterday, just trying to lean in a little bit and engage with people from different walks that, how are you thinking about this? How are you feeling about this? And I'm not coming here to tell you that this is what you should think or feel. I'm just trying to gain some perspective.
I think that's really valuable. You know, we had a stream just a couple hours ago about this, and I was sharing with a couple I was talking to, is that, look, my perspective is so different than your perspective, obviously, for obvious reasons. But on top of that, there's sort of this international aspect to it, right? So I've lived on 4 different continents and 6 different countries, and every single one of those countries had racism. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them. And it was in different directions as well, right? Mm-hmm. Different subgroups didn't like each other just because there was different subgroups. I was treated I experienced some racism in Africa from Africans because I was not African enough, Deb, I was telling them that Deb was in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and had a high school teacher walk out of the class because there was an American sitting in the class.
She had me walk out, actually.
Oh, she had you walk out. So that's even worse, actually. In Russia, Deb was at an American embassy, and people were throwing stones at the American embassy residence.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually not even the American embassy; it was just a building that belonged to the American embassy, and they had people there. Also in Russia, I experienced some racism because I didn't look Russian enough because I look Latin, right? Mm-hmm. And here, in the last 5 years in Austin, Texas, I have personally experienced excessive aggression from a police officer twice in different dimensions. One of them, we were on a prayer walk with a couple of guys, and we were literally frisked and, yelled at and, have your hands where I can see them, like that level of almost like military level command to a group of guys who are walking peacefully down the street praying. So the reason I tell you this is because I think what you were saying, Napoleon, is really important, is that instead of grouping putting people in classes and having these blanket statements about a race, it's not as bad as being racist, but it's in the range, because you're basically grouping a whole group of people with a variety of experiences and worldviews into one group and saying, you guys should X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important. And, this brought up even sort of this other layer of resentment that is a reaction, right? It's a reaction to injustice. But, there's a whole slew of posts that starts with "Dear white people," and I've been around, and I'm not really white. I'm sort of, confused, I'm a brown, I guess. I don't know who I am, but to me, because I've been around for so long and I've seen enough of this stuff all over the place, that bothers me when people say "dear whatever," as if everybody is the same that has that shade of skin. It's just not true,
And then for me, I see that and I think, yes, I want to repost that, because that's my experience here. And when we're in another country, for me, when I live somewhere else and I know that I'm the foreigner there, I expect it. But you are not foreigners here. This is your home. How I have been able to raise my children, who are also a blend of Latin, Eastern European, but when you look at them, you see white. They're very, very white, and they enjoy white privilege here. So when I talk to my girls about safety, about, there are normal fears that every parent has as your children start driving or start dating. We talked about having daughters, but the way conversations look in your home, the way that you raise your children, you have to have an entirely different set of conversations with them about how to be safe in situations, how to respond if you get pulled over for a routine traffic stop. Can you tell us, what does that look like in your home? How did that affect the way you raised your children?
So it's very interesting that I think for a long time, we lived in this bubble. In this, we are suburban, we live in the suburbs. We both have grown up in predominantly white spaces, except for where our neighborhoods, right? So we went to predominantly white schools and enjoyed the privilege of that, right? Like this sort of world-class education because of where we got to sit. Then we went off to a predominantly white university. We moved to a predominantly white area of Texas, right? And so you can sort of live in this, we did for a time live in this bubble of, our kids who are who they are, and they will be judged. Not that we didn't talk to them about things that were happening in the world, but we didn't, there wasn't this pressure as we were raising them until they got to driving age. And then you start to think about things a little bit differently. So our son is the oldest, and he is out driving, and I just would panic at times, right? Like, and so then you start having the conversations of, okay, so son, remember, you are not afforded the same assumptions, positive assumptions, as some of your peers, some of your friends. So if this were to happen, this is what I need you to do. And I remember the first time having that conversation with him, me personally, and like being super like mom, sort of matter of fact, and with him, and then just being heartbroken as after he walked away, right? And just praying for his safety. And then, so then you have these conversations, and a lot of African-American families, I bet you 10 years ago, they had these conversations with their sons, not so often with their daughters. And Sandra Bland really kind of changed that for us, right? Like the death of the arrest and whatever you think about any of these situations, it just, right? Like, and when it say her name, when that hashtag evolved by Kimberly Crenshaw, like say her name, because that was an entire group of people who were not in the media, right? And there were, in the years leading up to Sandra Bland's death, there were so many women who were wrongfully murdered, to say the least, right? But Sandra Bland, something about that changed. And our girls were driving to St. Louis. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
That our girls were driving up, and there was just, 6 girls in the car. And the Philando Castile
yes,
had just happened, right? It literally just happened. They were on the road. And I could not sleep. And I called them, and I'm like, who's driving right now? And I don't remember who was driving, but it wasn't one of my girls. And so there's this car full of girls who are Black and brown and white, and and I'm like this is a beautiful picture of these 6 friends driving to a Christian conference together, right? But so then the girls were like, well, when we stop, it's going to be my turn. One of my daughters said, it's going to be my turn. And I said, listen, here's what I need you to do. When you all stop, this is what I need you to do. I need you to walk around the car, check every light to make sure all the lights are working properly. I need you to take your driver's license out of your wallet. I need you to give it to whoever is in the passenger seat. Just have them hold onto your driver's license so that if anything happens, you don't have to open anything. You don't have to do anything to get your driver's license, okay? And the registration, know where the registration is in the car. Like this is what I'm talking as I'm shaking, right? Because this man has just been killed. And like that was devastating to have those kinds of, and I didn't tell them what had happened. They didn't know. I just was like, they didn't know that this had happened, and Missouri was, or well, not Missouri, Minnesota was on, erupting, right? They didn't know. But here's mommy like, hey, can you just do this for me? Just want you guys to be safe. Where are you right now? Like, can you not stop in any small towns? That's not the kind of thing you want to talk to your kids about.
It's not, and I think the situations repeating themselves over and over and over again. There's a corrosive effect of that that basically tells us this is normal. And the truth is, I think what's happening now is there's this mass shift in awareness that if this is normal, we need to change. We need to have a new normal.
Yes, it's not supposed to be.
It's not supposed to be like that. Like my second experience was on the road. It was in the middle of the day. I was in Mopac. I was not in a strange, weird neighborhood. I went above the speed limit, got pulled over, and the guy got really jumpy because I was reaching for my insurance card. And I thought, and he was like, hey, be careful what you and I'm like, okay, that's fine. But then later it dawned on me, okay, so this is a moving violation. This could be it can't possibly be further from criminal activity of any sort. it's not even in the neighborhood, not even in the vicinity of something strange and shady. It's in the middle of the day. It's in a nice middle class area. How is this normal? I mean, this guy gets a salary from my tax money. How is this normal? How is this acceptable for someone to speak like that? If the odds of danger to the police guy are so infinitesimally low.
Right.
Like if you're rational about it,
Right.
Right. How is this normal? And I think to me, the question is, how do we, without being destructive, speak that truth? The normal needs to become a new normal. This is not okay. This is not acceptable from someone who is empowered by the government to keep us safe and to serve us, right? Do you have any thoughts about that? Because that stays in my mind, especially now.
Yeah, like I said, my engineering brain got to working and wanted to try to figure out a solution and started looking to see. We seem to hear a lot from the victims or from people who were disgruntled, and I thought, what are we hearing from the law enforcement community? What are you guys thinking and feeling about what's going on? What are you doing to give us some sense that, hey, we see something is wrong and we're going to do something about it? So I got online and I'm looking to see, there's got to be something, right? All cops were not the same way, so surely someone is doing something. And the first thing I came across was this thing called the Center for Policing Equity. And this guy literally was right along my thought process, like, oh, you got to look at the data, and if you use the data, it'll drive some improvement. And he was talking about how to redefine racism from the standpoint of making it a solvable problem. Now, essentially what he was saying is, if you put some metric to, hey, here's what's going on, we can see that this is what's happening. Black guys are 2 to 4 times more likely to be have force acted upon them in these interactions than anybody else, right? The data will show you, hey, something needs to change. That takes away some of the emotion and all the extra brouhaha that's going on, because then I have some data in front of me to make it work. That's only going to be, again, my engineering brain and kind of an intermediate kind of solution. It's my mitigation plan. Stop killing us, please. Here's the plan to drive some data to stop the killing, because the problem really is hearts and minds of people, right? There's fear running rampant through everyone right now. Your police officer he is well aware that things are happening, and so I have to be more on edge with whoever I stop. I don't know what people are thinking, right? The world is crazy. He may not be the cop who is doing something, but now other cops are doing things that are making people react a certain way. So I have to be on edge too, because I don't want somebody to react to me. And logic goes out the window. So first, I believe you have to find a way to say, hey, what are you doing, police officers, and communicate that to the people that this is what we're doing to stop this. And then they have to take some action to stop it. Stop doing these things. Here's the data that says what you're doing. It's clear. Please don't give excuses. Don't drag out investigations. Do something that is driven by not your emotion or my emotion. I'm not sure what the work has to be done to change hearts, right? That's a long-term plan. But we can't wait on that. We can't wait for the root cause of the problem to get solved, because the root cause of the problem is that everyone isn't considering themselves a true follower of Christ. They're not saying, hey, this is the heart I'm going to live with. So I can't expect you to treat me like that. So what do? We have to put some things in place to say, hey, everyone is seeing this. Let's have conversations to make them at least get to the point where we're going to stop these kinds of actions and hold people accountable, really hold people accountable. All this, even as I say it now, it feels like, oh, these are things that this isn't new, right? None of this is new. These words that I'm using are not new. So how do you make someone go and do something there, right? Which is that, I guess that cycle just feels so hopeless. I can say this, I can say that I've given this some thought, and that's kind of where I feel like things kind of need to start. As far as what needs to happen for a root cause and people kind of thinking about how do we help to change hearts. It is so much more of engaging and engaging, like I said, from the standpoint of humility. I'm going to let you be the wronged person right now. I don't need to explain to you why my situation is like yours or whatever. You are the one hurting. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to let you be the wronged. And I'm going to do everything I can to understand that perspective, because the perspective that you're coming from really isn't just at least from my perspective, is not a normalized kind of racism. It's a systemic, built up kind of thing where the systems that we're dealing with are built up to make sure that this exists. And we see it, and we know it. People know it so much that they use it to try to weaponize cops, right? Where I'm going to say that I'm going to call the cops on you and say this thing because you know that they're going to come after you if I do this.
Right.
So
that was horrifying, by the way.
That was.
You know that this is a thing. This isn't.
You know this is not random.
It's dangerous.
Right. It's not random. You know that this is happening, and you are deciding to do something with it. It's not just Black people are feeling this. They're just making it up. No, you know it too,
Right.
and you're using it for your own evil purposes. So we can't keep acting like it doesn't exist. This is real. So listen so that you can get some perspective. And even with all the painfulness and the destruction that happens with these riots, nobody wants for that to be happening.
Mm-hmm.
But are you trying to understand why it goes there? Are you trying
to the language of the unheard?
Mm-hmm.
Right. You're worried about the property, but this man's body was just destroyed. You're worried about someone's livelihood. You just took someone's life.
Exactly.
Why is that what you're more concerned about than this?
Mm-hmm.
If you listen, and everyone won't get it, but those of us who are not so affected need to take the time to say, let me listen to you and hear your hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It'll go a long way in just being heard, right? I think the call last night, though it was just an hour, people just felt like, okay, that was good. Someone heard my prayer. God heard my prayer. It was useful. And personally, I don't want to have to engage. I don't want to have to engage in these conversations. This isn't what I want to wake up everyone. Let's go have this conversation that's just going to have people pouring out their hurt. It's not unfortunate. What's the word I'm looking for? Kingdom shines brightest in darkness, right? Kingdom activity shines brightest when there's darkness, but we have to engage in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to start having conversations about, okay, how are we going to engage? What does that look like, right?
Yeah.
Me and my small group are going to talk about, hey, what can we do, right? What is it that we can do? Who can we listen to? Who can we hear? What can we do? I was kind of moved to that last night because, like I was saying, I was kind of like, this just all feels so overwhelming. But just the opportunity to kind of hear people out, I was like, okay, well, that's actually pretty useful.
Yeah.
It's on a smaller scale, and I think some of what you guys are doing could be useful as well, as we just kind of make sure that the perspectives get heard.
People's lived experiences, I think,
Right.
is the power of that. Like the call last night, we had 24 phones on about 50 people, and I've gotten message after message after message after message. And honestly, like it shouldn't have been unexpected, but that was unexpected, right? Like I get the first message immediately, like the call ended and my phone starts blowing up. Like that was amazing. Thank you so much for opening up this space. This was unbelievable. This was so powerful. And this even from people who didn't get to pray, right? Mm-hmm. So there were more people. There were probably, like I said, about 50 people on the call in an hour. And we had just a few things that we wanted to share and prayers that we wanted to be able to pray too. But it was like, oh, wow, this is what is needed right now. And it is a great starting place. It is the starting place, right? To be able to open up a space for people to just be honest and real and say what they're thinking and feeling, and to be able then to bring people back to, okay, so now what, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
Thank you so much. Thank you both for sharing just the process, the journey that you've been on emotionally. And I so much respect and admire you both for taking this spiritual battle to your knees, because there's a lot playing out on TV and in our cities and across the nation. And you have recognized the spiritual battle within it. And as these, I believe, demons of fear and shame and guilt, that regardless of where we fall, whether it's what our different nationalities are, our ethnic upbringing, our backgrounds, the same demons are attacking all of us. It just comes up in different ways. You know, some of us feel guilt and shame, and some feel rage and anger or hurt. But when you recognize those and you go to God with them, instead of blaming God or blaming others, but you can go to God, who is just, and he says vengeance is his and he will avenge us, and that we know that we can take our battles to him and our pain to him, and that we're healed by his wounds. I love the example that you have set, and that you stepped out on faith and said, I don't know how to do this call. It's actually going to be a call. It's not going to be a Zoom. And I don't know what this will look like. Thank you for sharing how you even took some time to study out in scripture what this would look like. Just on that note, I wonder, do you have any advice for us? Thank you for sharing what you're doing with your small group as well and engaging in conversations. Do you have any advice for what people can study out in the Bible, things that you have studied that have been helpful to you to navigate this?
Well, I have a couple of things. One being the letters of Paul, because this is not a new, as Christian, has talked about, this is not new. And our brothers and sisters in the first century, for sure, right, were dealing with these same issues. Just the division was not over skin color, right? The division was over pedigree, I would say, well, right? Like Gentile versus Jew, but it's the same systemic issues that the church dealt with then. And so, I'm going back through the letters of Paul right now. I did that in 2018. Something else happened, and I was reading through the letters of Paul and the book Crossing the Lines at the same time. Crossing the Line by Michael Burns, which was very, very helpful in at least opening up some ideas about how to think about this, what's happening in the world from a spiritual perspective. So that's been super helpful to me personally, studying about prayer, reading through the Psalms and finding those Psalms that really speak to that right now. But studying prayer from all aspects. I've been writing prayers out, like specific prayers that you can share publicly. And like one of them we read last night, studying the Lord's Prayer, right? Because the kingdom, we have to bring kingdom to the world, right? Yes. That's what prayer is about. So that for sure. On the call last night, I recommended some books for people to read. Actually, I was just working on an essay, what to do when you don't know what to do. And one of those things is educate yourself. Don't do anything. Pray first. So don't talk to people until you have talked to God. And then secondly, educate yourself. TED Talks, if you don't want to read a book, watch some TED Talks. Just type in racism. Just type in systemic racism. Just type in how not to be a jerk. I don't care, like any of those things. And you will get a flood of talks. But if you want to read books, that was one of the things, like for us, it's just really embracing the stewarding your influence. Like I literally shared a picture with a stack of books that people could read today on Facebook. And the response has been overwhelming. I mean, when I say overwhelming, people are like, oh my goodness, thank you for sharing this. What would you recommend? They're sending me private messages. So those kinds of things, right? Like just type in books that I should read to understand what's happening in our world today. But Crossing the Line for Christians, for sure. Stamped is another good one. White Fragility is another good one for people to read. So.
That's great. Well, I think I was in, I'm going to share this for a Sunday service, but I was in Mozambique when Mandela was in jail, and he was my hero. Like, he was my superhero growing up, and I already had left when he was released. But the whole time I was there, it was the neighboring countries. So we had an ANC. Mozambique was a country that accepted ANC, the African National Congress, which is Mandela's party, as a legal thing. And the one of the ANC offices was across the street from where I lived. And the apartheid regime sent commandos in the middle of the night Green Beret level stuff through the ocean. Like, they disembarked in the middle of the night, walked through the city, and blew up the offices. And it was across the street from me. And I remember my mom waking me up saying there's war, and she wanted to, and then we found out it was right across the street. Now, the reason I tell you all of this is that was sort of probably the most egregious in the modern history societal systemic experiment that made basically racism a official policy of the government. This is the South African experiment, and it was just absolutely evil and terrible. And I remember how it just transformed me from the inside out. I was already a Christian, and I was in Russia, and they told me that the only church, or maybe at least one of the very, very few, that was completely not normal for South Africa, that was integrated, was the Johannesburg Church of Christ. And it had people of all skin colors and shades, fellowshipping, hugging, singing, praising God, loving each other. And I remember how transformative that was for me, because I remember those days as a kid, knowing that this was the neighboring country right there. This is how it was, And I think today, ultimately, I think it's almost like there's a societal systemic issue that should be solved and pushed against in a societal systemic way. I think what Napoleon was saying is like, look, I know you're not a follower of Jesus, but it's not okay for you to kill us, right? Okay, so we need to do something about that. We need to stop being politically correct and sort of be able to exchange information about policy making methods on change. And on the other hand, at the same time, knowing that the problem is not it's not only racism, it's not only systemic, it's not institutional, it's not white or black, it's sin, right? That's the fundamental problem. And I think by living out, it's almost like we feel small and incapable of change, of inducing sort of change, because we don't have power. But the truth is, we do have power. Just by getting together on Sundays, just by doing what you did with your prayer calls and Zoom calls, where brothers and sisters of all colors would come together and express love and support and live it out. That alone is powerful, right? That's kingdom life right there, kingdom methods. And I think, Mandela was transformational because of that, because he refused to either condone or even lead revenge. He refused. And that's what made him the man he is, like the legend, because it's so supernatural for someone to be like that, And I think what you're doing, the way you're processing, is that way. It's supernatural and transformational on more levels than I think you can even fathom right now, So thank you for joining us. Do you have any other thoughts, any last thoughts, any advice?
Thank you.
No, when she was sharing what she was reading, I thought the one thing that I've been, I guess, ruminating on is Ephesians 4:26. In your anger, do not sin. Right? It's one of those things where it's okay for us to be angry with what's going on, but we have to still hold true to our faith and be obedient, and that not sinning. I need to understand what people are thinking and feeling, but I can't let it become my thought and my feeling. I can't let that drive my action, which is challenging. right? It's got its whole set of challenges. Because when you're empathetic, you kind of can get sucked into everyone's depth of pain. But what it has to drive us to do, and it calls you to be courageous, because you have to figure out, what am I going to do? If I don't give in to this thing, doing nothing is not acceptable either. Which is, again, the challenge for me, is to not like, okay, I can either be angry or I can do nothing. No, you can. There are different choices. So figuring out, what am I going to do in order to not live out some angry reaction to something that literally it deserves anger. It doesn't deserve some response that is going to perpetuate the situation. And in saying that, anyone who might listen, I'm not trying to call out what you're thinking or feeling, but this is the thing that I'm having to wrestle with, and trying to understand even how to communicate that to someone, so that it doesn't become, I hear that thing over here, but you can't be doing this, right? It feels like I'm dismissing what you're feeling in order to call you to something different. That happens through cultivating relationship, because if you don't think I care about you, you're not really going to care what I have to say. If I try to call you out, you're going to feel like I called you out. And it takes courage to lean in to do that. So though that scripture seems like it's just talking about dealing with anger, it's one of those that kind of makes you peel back some layers. It's like, what am I going to do in lieu of sinning in my anger?
Right.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Well said.
Well said. Well, we should keep having those conversations, and this really, really helps. So thank you, guys. Thank you both.
We love you so much. We love your family.
Thank you so much for this space. Holding space is so important, So thank you for doing that.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining Tribe Stories. Stay in, subscribe, stay in the conversation with us. Thank you, Napoleon and Andrea Greene.